Hello, this is Dan from Stage 2. I wanted to do a little video just on the basics of how to keep your band together, specifically how not to let your band split up, and also just talking about the basics of how to get better as a band and how to improve. This probably sounds like a bit of a dumb video to make really, but you'll be surprised by the amount of musicians that I have asking me advice on this kind of thing. Now, before I get going, I do need to give a bit of a disclaimer. I'm not a trained counsellor. If you do have any needs, medical needs or mental health needs, I would recommend speaking to a trained professional. However, I do give advice when asked, and people do come to the studio, and our door is always open if you do have something you want to speak to. And sometimes just getting something off your chest can be the first step into improving what it is that needs improving in either your personal life or your band life. Also, bear in mind, I'm not a massively successful musician, although I've been in bands on and off for over 20 years, and more than that, I've been running the studio for about 11 years. So I do think I do have a good insight into how bands operate, and obviously I see a lot of bands from the outside looking in. So I think I'm quite well placed to be able to offer some quite good impartial advice which might help you and your band get along. And at the end of the video I will go through some of the comments that some of you kindly made on a Facebook post I put up on the Stage 2 Studios Facebook page yesterday, and I'll respond to those, and hopefully we'll gain some insight and see if there's any areas where we agree or disagree, and we'll take it from there. So first of all, let's actually talk about your band. Who's in your band? What's the dynamic within your band? Who gets things done in your band? Does your band have a leader? Does it have someone who's more proactive? Does it have someone who takes the lead in booking rehearsals, booking gigs? Do you get on with your band? Are you friends? Is it more of a business relationship, or is it more of a partnership or a kind of a friendship circle that you've got? The members of your band, are they responsible? Do they look after themselves? Are they look after their own personal health and hygiene? Do they look after their own equipment? Do they drive? Do they have a job? Do they have addiction issues? Do they have issues with alcohol or drugs? Are you aware of them? Were you aware of them? Have these things occurred over time? What do? Do you support them? How did you choose your band members? Well, did your band happen by mistake? Is it just a coincidence? Is it familiarity? Have you been in bands with them before? Did you go to school with them? Did you apply to join the band? Were they already an ongoing concern? I'm just asking these questions to kind of get an idea of what your band is, where you come from, what kind of dynamic you have in that band. Are you just a bit player in the band? Are you a session kind of player, or are you a fully paid up member of the band? Do you have something to say in regards to songwriting and the way the band's moving on? Thinking about the people in your band. If someone has issues in your band, like I said, medical issues or mental issues, or maybe you don't get on with them some way. For some people, is it actually good for them to be a musician? Is it good for them to be in a band? Some people aren't cut out to be in a band. Is it healthy for them to be in a band, especially if your band's on tour? You'll find at gigs, you'll be sat by a bar for hours on end waiting for the gig to start. Is that a healthy environment for someone who might have some kind of issues like that? And if someone doesn't have a job and isn't self-sufficient and doesn't drive, what else do they bring to the table? Are they fantastic songwriters or performers or musicians? Or sometimes the most exciting musicians and songwriters can tend to be quite unstable people. So difficult personalities can sometimes make a band. It can be what drives people to come and watch you and listen to you. And how many people are in your band? Some say that 3 is a magic number. I've always got on with a 4-piece band. Some people like to have 2 or 3 guitarists. Do you need all those guitarists? Is it worth having all those members of the band, because it's going to add to fuel costs and your transport costs and your accommodation, that kind of thing? Every member of the band that you have is a potential extra problem. I mean, you could look at it the other way. It's a potential extra fantastic addition to your band. But maybe having 5, 6, 7 members in your band isn't a healthy thing to do. And what do you do if you have a problem band member? Do you speak to them? Do you sack them? Are you quite ruthless? Do you look at it as a kind of business decision? Or do you treat your band as more of a kind of friendship thing? And do you try and help them? Do you support them? Are you there to pull them up when they're down? And hopefully vice versa, they do the same for you if you're in a situation. I'd like to hear your comments on how you've dealt with different band members and different issues, because I think there's lots of different ways to approach it. But I think the key way to alleviate most of these issues and hopefully keep your band together is communication. And I see all the time with bands, especially coming in and out of the studio, the one thing that happens which causes these bands to disintegrate or people to leave or animosity to grow is a lack of communication. If there is a lack of communication and a lack of quality communication within your band, it can cause real issues. And usually when that communication breaks down, that usually signals the end of the band. So think about the way that you can communicate better with your band. Some people don't react well to texts or WhatsApp messages or emails. Some people are better speaking face to face. Vice versa, there are some people who really struggle to have face to face verbal communication and are better doing it digitally. You need to find a way which works for your band. There's no right or wrong answer in this. So let's look at the absolute basics of being in a band, starting a band. So this is very much geared towards those bands starting out, amateur bands with maybe the ambition to become a professional band in the future. Let's look at the absolute basics. So let's start with a band practice situation or a rehearsal. So we all know that rehearsal is probably one of the most important things to being a better band and being a better individual musician. One of the most important things is to turn up on time. Now that can sound obviously an obvious thing to say, but if you don't turn up on time and if you're not punctual or you're not organised, that can really get under the skin of the other band members. So that's going to cause issues. So do think about your conduct and the way that you're approaching things like band practice, because these little things, even if it's a bit of a joke that you always turn up 10 minutes late, that little thing might add up and become a bigger issue which becomes irreconcilable down the line. So try not to turn up late, and if you have got a reason why you're always turning up late, make sure you communicate with that with your band members. Secondly, try and come prepared to a band practice. So maybe it's a good idea before you have a band practice is to actually discuss with each other what is the purpose of that practice. Are you practicing for an upcoming gig? Is it a songwriting session? Is it simply a practice just to keep your chops up and to rehearse the songs and keep the band at gigging standard? If you are, for instance, working on a song, then individually you should try and come prepared for that practice and have that song prepared, or at least your parts fleshed out to an extent so you have got something to bring to the table when you do arrive at the band practice. If you turn up to the band practice and you're all prepared and you've got your parts ready and you've thought of some ideas and some harmonies and where the song can go, and another member of the band turns up and they haven't listened to the song since you last had a jam, and they're like, oh, what are we doing again? Oh, I think I remember that one. I don't. That can really get under the skin and really irritate and annoy other band members. And this is one of the main reasons why bands split up or bands sack various members, because they don't feel like they're getting the respect from certain band members, and they don't feel that they are putting in as much effort as they are. So yeah, have a plan of action for your rehearsal. Maybe before the actual rehearsal, you speak to the band. What are we trying to achieve from this rehearsal? And maybe have a plan of action and structure your rehearsal accordingly. So some bands like to come in, make 10 minutes of noise, run through 3 songs, have a cup of tea, have a quick chat about the way the rest of the practice is going to pan out, then get back in the room and spend a good 2-3 hours just ploughing through it. If you have a little goal to work towards, then when you achieve that goal, you will come away from the practice feeling that you have actually achieved something and it hasn't been a complete waste of your time. So a good way of building momentum in your band practices and going forward is to record your practices. Now, a lot of people will use their phones to record their practice, and the microphones on these mobile phones have got a lot better over the years. What I do personally for the band I'm in is I have a little Zoom handy recorder which has got a stereo mic on the top of the recorder, and it can take up about 10 hours of recording time. The battery lasts forever, so I just stick it up on a mic stand in the middle of the room and I start recording as soon as I arrive at band practice, even before I've set up my mic. That way, if the guitarist is making some noise, or the drummer or the bassist are making some noise, and something sounds good, and we start making some noise and jamming together, It's those little bits of magic which can sometimes make a song. Now, if you haven't recorded that, or you didn't have a recording device ready to go, by the time you try to revisit that idea, which was in the moment, you've lost it. Generally, you never really quite capture that same moment that you had when you were just messing around without a care in the world. So if you just have something recording all the time, chances are you'll forget it's there, and hopefully there might be one or two tiny pieces within that 4 hour, 5-6 hour practice, even if it's just a couple of seconds, which you want to keep. You can edit that later on after the band practice, put it in a Dropbox for everyone to listen to. And these things generally can sometimes form the basis for an entire song. I know from a personal point of view, we've had ideas that we were just messing around with while someone was tuning up, and that's gone on to actually form an entire song. And also ideas that we've recorded which we have no intention of doing anything with, but I've put them in a Dropbox archive, and months and months down the line we've been working on a new song, and we've got to a point in the song where we have a little bit of a brain freeze, and we know the song needs to go somewhere, needs to change, maybe the tempo or the key or the dynamics need to change, but you're in a bit of a funk and you can't figure out where that song needs to go. Having something at your disposal like an archive of riffs and ideas is a really positive way to say, oh, this idea that we had 3 months ago didn't sound great on its own, but if you put it with this, wow, that sounds really cool. And you sometimes find that using old riffs that recycling old ideas that again you didn't really have an intention to use, but recycling them and putting them with something fresh can give that idea new life. You can often find that what you come up with is something totally unique and not the kind of thing you would have come up with instinctively. So it's almost like you're cheating your way into writing a song, even though you're not cheating because you came up with both ideas. You just didn't necessarily come up with both ideas in the same context. So it's a really, really good technique, in my opinion anyway, of coming up with interesting structures and ideas, and just of keeping things going, because we all hit those creative ruts where we're just stuck in a loop and you can't see the wood for the trees. So anything you can do to get yourself out of that. And I would say, if you're in a band practice situation and you hit one of those ruts and you're all starting to get a little bit tetchy, because tensions can rise sometimes, even though it's silly, isn't it, because we're just playing music, but tensions can rise. What I would say is someone needs to go, let's move on, put this to one side, let's not stress about it, let's come back to it another time, maybe later on or the next band practice. That it's not worth stressing over something, because that is when the tension starts to creep in. So yeah, use Dropbox or WeTransfer or any kind of modern day technology which will help facilitate that writing process, especially if you're not in a situation where you can rehearse regularly. There are some bands who might only be able to meet with each other once a month because of the practicalities of modern day life, and people who've got families and jobs, or someone might live outside the area. So you need to really make the most of the band practice time that you have together. So in that intervening period, using technology to your advantage can really help speed things along. So this is why it's good to have someone who's leading the rehearsal. You need someone who has a bit of a focus, a bit of a drive, and can kind of steer the rehearsal, and structure the rehearsal in a way, because you have to have someone leading it. A proper democracy doesn't really work in a band, especially when the band is lacking those people with leadership. You do need someone in the band. It doesn't matter if it's the singer or the bassist or the drum. You need to have someone in the band who is good at leading and motivating people, and you also need people in the band who can be led and are okay with someone else taking the lead. It doesn't mean that someone's writing all the songs, making all the decisions. It just means that someone's there to steer the ship. So there will be times where whoever is doing that and leading that practice will be asking a lot of the rest of the band. And I know I do it, and I know sometimes I probably overdo it in the bands I'm in, and I probably come across as a little bit of a little Hitler, because I ask the band, right, we need to do that again, we'll do that again, can we go through the whole thing again, right, start from the chorus again. And I will keep asking them to repeat sections, and I'm not doing it to annoy them. I'm doing it because it's a well-known technique that repetition will iron out all the creases and trim off the fat and improve every little section of the songs. So, and they're aware of that, and I'm quite honest, and I like to keep the communication honest and frank and obviously humorous, and it is a fine line between not being not ruling with an iron fist, but also trying to motivate the people around you and to get the most out of them. From a personal point of view, I don't really play an instrument. I play a little bit guitar, but I'm mainly a vocalist, so it's very difficult for me to input musical ideas other than I can kind of sing the idea or the structure that I have. So I have to kind of work in a language with the guitarist and the bassist and the drummer, which I hope they'll understand, and it won't be too rudimentary in the way I'm trying to tell it to them. So obviously there has to be an element of respect from me to them in terms of the instrument they're playing, and I don't want to talk down to them, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm asking them how to play their instrument, because I wouldn't dream of doing that and I wouldn't know how to. But everything about working together in a team, it is about having those diplomatic skills. So if there is something that someone in the band is doing which you instinctively know probably isn't right, and it's quite sometimes it can be quite hard to tell that person what you truly think about what they're working on, and you do have to be honest, and you have to practice honesty, not just in the band situation but in interpersonal situation as well. So developing that kind of relationship with the people you're in a band with is crucial. To know that you can be honest with them, and know that when you're being honest, you're not doing it vindictively, you're trying to be constructive, and the reason you're being honest with them is because you respect them, and you know how good they are at their instrument and how good they are at writing songs and performing, and you want them to be as good as they can be. So practice using a spoonful of sugar, so if you do need to critique someone, and obviously bear in mind they have to be able to critique you as well, so you have to have a thick skin and you have to be able to take criticism. But if you are going to critique someone's playing, give them the spoonful of sugar and pay them a compliment. Say, I really like the way you approach the guitars on the chorus. Perhaps you could do that on the verse, rather than saying, what you do on the verse is crap, can you do something better? So pay them a compliment. And then obviously psychologically, you've paid them a compliment and you've told them, I really like what you do, I want you to do more of that. That's a good way of getting around it. And obviously people aren't stupid, they know what you're doing and they know if something's not working as well. Generally, you will find that most people agree with most things. You will have situations where you have a complete disagreement on how a song should go. And it's those situations where the majority kind of has to rule. And if you do have a situation where there's a vote, and I don't know, if there's 4 people in the band and you have to vote, right, should this song do this or should this song do that? And 2 of you vote for one and 2 of you vote for the other. My best advice would be move on to something else, because you're only asking for trouble. And obviously you're only asking for trouble if one person votes for something, because they'll feel like they're being ganged up on, and I've been in those situations, and it can really hurt. I've been on both ends of it as well. It can be really hurtful when you've got the rest of the band telling you that something you're doing isn't good enough, or they're all, I've been in a situation where the band have told me that they're embarrassed by something I do vocally, and that really knocked the stuffing out of me at the time. But they were completely right, and when I look back on it, it made me a better vocalist, because I didn't realise that the thing they were saying they didn't like I didn't realise I was doing it. And then when I then listened to myself singing, I actually I could hear it. I was like, oh my god, I've been doing that for years, and that's really bad. And so I had to make a conscious decision and consciously know not to do it in future. So it took me a few months of singing and having this in my mind, and it was quite a negative feeling, because it felt like they were judging me, but they were completely right to do so, and it actually made me a better singer. So I was humbled, I had my ego knocked a little bit, my pride was a little bit damaged, but it made me a better person and a better singer at the end of it. It also made it easier for me to critique them, because I realised where the boundaries were. So if you do have a policy of absolute honesty with the people you're working with. It might be a bit cruel on occasion, and it might feel a bit raw, but it is the best way to go. And obviously this doesn't just apply for being in bands, this just applies for life in general. I do think honesty is the best thing you can do, but it's so true in bands, because it is like a relationship, isn't it? It's like being in a marriage, or at least an engagement, with 3 or 4 people. And like a marriage or an engagement or any kind of relationship, you have your ups and your downs, and you really do have to work on the relationship at all times. And when you start taking the rest of the people in that relationship for granted, things start to slip, standards start to slip, your standards might start slipping, and you do need the other person or the other people to kind of be there to kind of pick you up and sometimes prod you and remind you, oi, you shouldn't be doing that. And that's not just from a music point of view, that's from a personal point of view as well. Maybe the way that you're looking after yourself, or the way, you know, your personal life is going, because these people are your friends at the end of the day. So if you can be in a band where the people in around you are totally honest with you, then that does show you that they respect you. They respect you enough to give you the truth and want the best for you. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want. We all want the best for each other, don't we? We wouldn't critique each other to be vindictive, or at least I hope no one would do that. So yeah, it's all about wanting the best for everyone in the band. But you can't control everyone at the end of the day. All you can control is yourself. So if you're prepared, if you have your stuff ready, if you're motivated and coming to your rehearsals with a positive mindset, even if the rest of the band aren't, at least you can live safe with the knowledge that you did everything you could. And hopefully that positivity that you bring to the rehearsal will rub off on the rest of the band. And you will find yourself in a situation where you're on a down and you don't have that get up and go, and you're feeling like, I can't be arsed with this. And we all have it. We all have those times where it's like, oh, I really don't want to go to band practice tonight. I'm really not in the mood. It's those times where you really should do everything you can to get to that rehearsal. Because if you can do that, then you can do it whenever. And if you're down, hopefully the other people can pick you up. That's a sign of a good, healthy relationship. So other ways of showing a little bit of respect to your bandmates. In a rehearsal situation, the very basics again, turn down a little bit, turn your amp down, and there's no need to be at gig level standards, because the purpose of your rehearsal is to rehearse and to work on music and to improve not just yourself, but improve the whole. The whole is always greater than the sum of its parts. So you don't have to be at gig standard in terms of volume. Now, if you are rehearsing for a gig, you might want to run through the set in a gig situation, i.e. have the amps up a little bit loud, so you're going to have a natural feedback. Maybe that's something you wouldn't get from playing at low volumes. Also, you might want to point your amps away from the drummer and face the wall, so you're not looking at each other. Because again, in a gig situation, ideally, you're not going to be looking at each other the whole time. You're going to be looking at the audience. So that's really a good technique. Turn the lights down or turn them off, and just have the lights from your guitar pedals, because more often than not in a gig situation, there's going to be very poor lighting. And again, if you're rehearsing in perfect circumstances and you've got eye contact, you're not getting your band ready for the gig, because the gig is a completely different beast. Generally, you're going to be sober at a band practice, and generally, most bands will have a pint or two at the gig. Again, you haven't practiced drunk. Ideally, you should stay sober at the gig because you practice sober. But in the real world, most people will have a little drink at the gig. Hopefully no more than a couple. So again, the gig situation is not exactly like the rehearsal situation. So you need to have a contingency plan, and you need to be rehearsed to the extent where you're confident in not just what you're doing, but what the rest of the band are doing. See, that's the key to a lot of this. I've been in bands where I get stressed, not about me and my performance, because I feel like I always kind of over prepare for things, and I try and work out every scenario that can happen. And I'm not perfect, and obviously I make mistakes, but I worry about the rest of the band, and you know, is someone going to be prepared enough? and I get stressed, and that affects my performance. So I've learned over the years to try and shut off and not be such a control freak, because I can't control everybody. All I can do is control myself and hope that my conduct will rub off on the people around me. And obviously that sounds quite big-headed in a way, doesn't it? Because it means that I'm being quite holier than thou. But it's the only way I can kind of get through it mentally, because if I worry about everything and every scenario, then I'm not going to sleep. So just to finish off this section about practicing and how practicing in the right way can stop your band from developing unhealthy dynamics. Like I said, you have to be diplomatic, and it's the whole spoonful of sugar thing. And you also need to leave your egos and attitudes at the door. But the rehearsal room should be a safe space for all ideas. If someone's talking, let them talk. Don't start playing your guitar or hitting the drums while someone's trying to say something. Let them speak. Let them feel like their voice is being heard and their opinion matters. Be prepared to take the constructive criticism from your bandmates, because if you can't take it from your bandmates, you're really not going to take it from anyone else. And if you've chosen to be in a band, you have to be prepared to have some stinging criticism, and you have to develop a thick skin. You will get people slagging you off left, right and centre. You have to be prepared for it. People, especially now with the advent of YouTube and the internet and all this kind of thing, you're going to get some nasty comments, and that is just life, because there are some people who just get off on hating on other people. Just remember, the only reason they're doing it is because they're usually jealous or they can't do it themselves. And one last thing on band practicing is try and keep it regular. Try and keep it either every week or a set time every month. Ideally, you should be practicing once or twice a week, but it's good to keep it regular. Again, going back to the whole dynamics and the happiness of the band. People thrive when they know that they've got something to go to, and something is regular, and they can rely on that band practice every week. So I might just cover the basics of rehearsing for a gig and actually playing the gig. I'm not trying to tell you what to do and how to do it. I'm just going to try and give you a couple of tips that I've learned over the years, which might make everything run smoother, might make you come across more professional, might increase the communication within your band, and make everyone feel a little bit more positive about both the rehearsal side of it and the gig side of it, how to deal with the mental anxieties of being in a band, because it can be quite complicated. So the absolute basics of getting a gig: the first thing you need to do is find out what time you need to be there for load-in, what time your sound check is, what equipment you need to bring, what time your stage time is, how long your set length is. So you need to rehearse for that gig. So if you've got a 30-minute allocated set, you need to rehearse exactly a 30-minute set. A 30-minute set doesn't mean 33, 34, 35 minutes. Do not go over your 30-minute set. The venue, the promoter, the other bands will not forgive you if you go over your set, because essentially what you're doing is eating into their setting up time, which ultimately will eat into their set time. So do not go over your set. If possible, go early. So if you've got a 30-minute set, try and time your set for about 29 minutes. If you get good at rehearsing your set and making sure the gaps between the songs are short and the same, and you're not changing anything in between, you should be able to get this set within a 20-second kind of mean time. So if you rehearse a set 6 times and time it 6 times, it should roughly be the same every time. You'll be amazed how little difference there'll be. So one thing you can do at band practice to get the band ready for the gig situation and to alleviate some of those anxieties that you might have is practice getting your stuff set up on time really quickly. So generally at a gig, if you don't have a sound check, or maybe if you do have a sound check, you'll still only have 10 minutes to get your stuff onto the stage after the last band have finished, and then start playing. So you need to get really good at getting your breakables on and your amps on and plugging in and being ready to go straight away. Making sure that everyone is on it in terms of getting their stuff on stage and starting on time, again, alleviates the anxieties of the rest of the band and makes everything run smoother, happier band, happier performance. So think about having a contingency plan if anything goes wrong. So if someone's amp does break in the setting up time before you play and it means you have to go on late, already know which song you're going to drop. So discuss it amongst yourselves. We'll say, if anything goes wrong, we're going to drop song number 6 from the set, and that'll give us an extra 3 minutes. Because again, the last thing you can do, even if you're going on late, you can't go over your set time. So agree that beforehand, and also have other songs ready. So you might have the situation where another band on the bill have dropped out, and so the promoter is asking you to extend your 30-minute set to a 45-minute set. So in that situation, you need to have other songs available to play. So you need to have these songs in a gig ready standard. So have the timings all written down and time it all beforehand. Again, in one of the bands I'm in, we have about 10 different permutations of our set already written out: a 30-minute set, a 35-minute set, a 40-minute set, a 45-minute set, and different variations of all of those. So if we're doing a gig last minute and they said, you've got a 50-minute set tomorrow, I'll go through our spreadsheet and go, okay, we'll do that set. And hopefully, it doesn't always happen this way, but hopefully we're rehearsed enough that we can just go and do it, and all the songs are at a rehearsed gig ready standard. So like I mentioned before, my advice for most bands is keep the gaps between the songs to an absolute minimum, because especially in this day and age when everyone is so distracted by their mobile phones and technology, if you start waffling on or tuning your guitar or just making incoherent noise between a song, people can lose interest, and you see it all the time. So keep the gaps to a minimum. If someone needs to tune their guitar, then think about ways that you can mask that, so maybe the drummer can start the beat of the next song early, and give that guitarist, after the second song, give him 20 seconds to tune his guitar. And guitarists, if you're tuning your guitar, you should have a tuner which enables you to silence it. No one wants to hear you tune the guitar. Put it on silent. And if you are going to say anything between the songs, rehearse it and make sure you know what you're going to say. There's no point talking for the sake of it. If you don't have something planned or you've got nothing interesting to say, don't say anything at all, because talking incoherent rubbish is not good for anybody. Personally, from a personal point of view, I don't like bands really talking between songs. I go to the gig to be entertained and listen to music. If I go to a gig and the singer starts going off on some political diatribe for 5 minutes, I just shut off. I'm not interested in that. It's a personal gripe of mine. It might not be for you, but unless you are a comedian or a storyteller, some kind of folk poet, where there's a reason for you to be talking and talking and talking, my personal opinion is I'd rather you shut up and get on with the songs, and then you've kept my attention then. And obviously when you're preparing for the gig, obviously preparing your songs, think about the tops and the tails of your songs. Does the song have a definite end? Does it fade out? Is everyone just making noise? Is the drummer building a shed? Sometimes those kind of endings sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I often, when I'm watching bands, you'll see a band finish a song and you won't know if it's finished, or they'll do a false finish. And so someone will start clapping, but then the cool kids in the audience who know the song, like, that's not the end, and then the song ends, and they're looking at the person who clapped like there's an idiot. Well, you just made that person feel like a complete idiot. Is that really what you want to do? Do you want to alienate people in the audience and make them feel small? So yeah, I don't like false finishes. I'd rather have a definitive ending to a song, whether that's just crashing out on the cymbals or whether it's a dump finish. Great. But do think about your tops and your tails, because it's that lasting impression that people have of your band. So at the end of your gig, if you finish well, that's the last thing they'll remember as they walk out. So think about the beginnings and the ends of your songs. And again, a lot of this sounds like I'm just giving you advice on how to play a gig, but this all feeds back into, obviously the purpose of this video is to make everyone in the band happier. So hopefully hear the views and concerns of your band and stop the band from developing unhealthy relationship issues within it. And playing a good gig and rehearsing for a good gig and making sure everything's professional will help. And just a tiny little bit of advice before we move on. When you are preparing for a gig, obviously going to music studios like this or other music studios is a really good opportunity for all of the band to get used to playing with other people's equipment. Now, if you're a band starting up, the likelihood is that most of the gigs you play, you won't be using your own drums, your own bass rig, your own cabs. you'll have to plug into whatever is being provided by either the venue or the headlining band. So you have to get used to working in a not so perfect situation and making compromises. So drummers, I would strongly suggest you get used to using a three-piece kit, or at least you know that you can pull off a gig using just one rack tom and a floor tom, because generally that's what you're going to get at most of these gigs. Now I understand for those prog rock drummers who need 6 toms and a china and a splash and a gong and stuff like that, I understand that you, in an ideal situation, you would have all that. But until you've made a name for yourself, until you're doing the tours, or you've got agents and managers and labels and stuff like that, the likelihood is those gigs are going to be few and far between where you get the opportunity to use your full kit. If you turn up to a standard gig where you're one band on a 4-band bill with a huge kit, the sound person is going to go, I'm not doing that, mate, because I don't have enough mics for your toms. You're making this an absolute pain because I've got 4 bands to get through tonight and you want me to rearrange everything just for your set. You have to make life as easy as possible for everybody involved, and that takes off the stress and the strain from the rest of the band as well. If you have one person, if you have a guitarist in the band who has 25 guitar pedals, and every gig something goes wrong and he can't figure out which lead it is, why don't you cut those guitar... I think if you were ruthless, you could cut those guitar pedals in half at least. You don't really need 25 guitar pedals. Now, like I said, when you've had a hit, when you're on tour, when you've made a name for yourselves and people love your band, you have whatever you want, mate. You'll have your own sound guy, you will have your own guitar technician, you'll have your own monitor engineer. That's the time you can use all the equipment in the world. But when you're a band starting up, streamline everything you've got. The more bits of tech and equipment you have, the more potential problems you'll have. It's just like I said earlier, the more band members you have is an extra potential problem. The least amount of band members and the least amount of gear and the least amount of electrical technology to go wrong, the better. I've been to so many gigs where you've had bands relying on click tracks and laptops and backing tracks, and you know, some of my favourite performers, I just think they ruined what they do. Like Devin Townsend's one of my favourite musicians in the world, but I abhor the fact that his live set now is pretty much run on a laptop, and if his laptop goes down, it makes for a shocking gig, because it exposes the fact that he's so reliant on all the backing tracks with the backing vocals, the backing guitars, everything going through this laptop. You take that away, and you think, what are we left with? My colleague Tim saw Devin Townsend at a festival, and this is a few years back, and his laptop went down then, and it got to the point where they still used the laptop, but the click was coming through the PA system. So everyone was hearing go the whole way through. And I think, what are you doing? To turn your laptop off, turn your amps up and be a rock and roll band. I personally like bands who are raw, who have that punk DIY ethic where they could just turn up anywhere, turn up the volume and play, and they're not relying on things which are out of their control sometimes. So yeah, get used to playing with other people's gear, get used to compromising, get used to being a streamlined outfit, travel light, take the spares, obviously, your strings, spare guitar maybe, spare sticks, that kind of thing, but travel really, really light, I would. Let's talk about the gig, how to make it a happy gig, how to make sure the people in the band are happy and it goes the way you expected it to go. Sound checks, I hate sound checks. You arrive early and you can be waiting around for hours and hours and hours, and you know, it ruins your day. You have to leave work early, that kind of thing. Only do a sound check if it's absolutely necessary. Most gigs, when you've got 3-4 bands on the bill, most of them these days, I would personally suggest that only the first band sound checks, because if most of the bands on that bill are sharing the back line, then you only really need to sound check the first band, and then all the other bands can just have a quick line check before they go on. And most sound people, if they're good at their job, will be able to dial your sound in properly within 30 seconds to a minute of you playing. So don't stress too much about sound checks. Talking about the sound person, make friends with the sound person when you get there. Now, I understand that sound people, sometimes they come in all different shapes and sizes. Some of them are great, some of them are lovely, some of them are amazing people. Some of them can be a little bit jaded and bitter. Maybe they've been around the block a little bit too long. Maybe they're sick to death of doing the sound for 2-bit local bands like ourselves. Try and change the psychology of that. When you get there, just be nice to them. Make sure you thank them during the sound check. Make sure you buy them a drink. You know, before you go on, buy them another drink. Change, like I said, change the mood. Showing the sound person a little bit of respect and thanking them for what they're doing can improve the sound of your gig by 10%. And you know, all these incremental changes can all add up and result in a better gig all round. And again, do what you're told. So if the sound engineer hasn't asked you to start playing your guitar, don't play your guitar. Wait for him to ask you. Wait, if you know, don't start hitting your snare drum if the sound man or sound person hasn't asked you to do it. And you don't have to play a whole song. Nobody wants to hear you play a whole song or 2 or 3 songs. This is not a band practice. This is a sound check. If you wanted to run through the songs, you should have done all that at band practice. It's no excuse to use your sound check as a way to practice your songs. I see this all the time and it winds me up. As soon as the levels are right for you and you've got a thumbs up from the sound person, stop playing. Look at each other, ask the drummer, ask your bandmates, everything all right? Do you need anything up or down? And you can just tell the sound person, I can have a little bit more vocal on this one, a little bit less guitar in that one. Can we try a quick one again? And he say, yeah, carry on. Start playing. 30 seconds in, if everything sounds all right, give each other the thumbs up. Stop playing. Say, thank you very much, sound person, that's perfect. Is there anything else you need from us? And if the sound person says, no, that's all fine, thank you, pack your stuff up, get off the stage. Trust me on this, the sound person, the venue, the promoter, they will thank you for not wasting anybody's time. The other bands will appreciate it as well, because they do not want to sit through listening to 2 or 3 of your songs. And one other little thing, if a sound person is on stage, and I've seen this happen, I've seen a sound person adjusting a microphone down by a kick drum, and then the drummer hit his snare and nearly deafened the guy, and he went mental. Don't do that. Make no noise when any of the staff are on the stage. Only make noise when you're asked to. There's a serious reason why they do that. And like I said before, from an individual point of view, try not to get too drunk, or try not to get drunk at the gig. Try to stick to the plan. Try to stick to what you rehearsed in the studio. Show some respect for the people around you. Now here's another personal gripe of mine, and I see a lot of bands doing this, and again, this isn't necessarily about how to stop your band splitting up. It's more to do about the actual gig itself. But I see a lot of bands, especially local bands, when they're playing a local gig, and they'll have a lot of their friends and family at the gig. And what they'll do is they'll end up performing almost to them. They'll maybe have some in-jokes, or they'll be smiling or winking at their friends in the audience. I don't like that, because what you're doing is you're alienating everyone else who isn't in on the in-joke or isn't part of your friendship group. They might just be people who are coming to try and catch some new talent and maybe discover some new bands. Don't play to your friends and family, play to the whole room. Play the show as if you know nobody and you're trying to win them all over. Play as if your life depends on it. Do not take your audience for granted. Do not alienate anyone in the audience. And I will talk a little bit about that later on more in depth, because if you are playing gigs to the same people, your family and friends, repeatedly, then maybe you're running the risk of being a big fish in a small pond. But we'll come on to that. Like I said before, try not to do too much talking on stage, unless you're a comedian or a storyteller. Don't try and tell everyone, oh, you can buy our t-shirts and CDs on the merch stand, because we're not stupid. We've seen your merch stand, it's by the door, and you know, as we walk out of the venue, we're going to walk past it. We know it's there, so don't treat us like idiots. Also, you don't need to tell us your website address on stage, because again, we're not stupid. As long as you tell us your band name, we know how to use Google. We're adults, and we will find you on the internet. So treat the audience with a little bit of respect. If anybody makes a mistake, this does really come into the whole keeping things cordial within your band. If anyone makes a mistake, don't telegraph it. So if the drummer misses a fill or doesn't come in on a part on time, don't everybody turn around and look at him, because what you've just done is telegraph the mistake to the entire room. Now the whole audience knows the drummer's made a mistake. If all of you just keep your eyes forward and focus on the room and focus on the audience and the music, the chances are the majority of people won't even recognise that any mistake even occurred. It's only us musicians who kind of pick up on those things anyway, because we're quite anal. I don't know about you. Obviously, I'm a singer, so I'm always trying to pick on the mistakes that the singer makes. And I expect when I'm at a gig with the guitarist in our band, I expect he's looking at the guitarist and judging him, because that's what we do. We just judge each other, don't we? We're quite ruthless in that regard. And if you do talk between songs, please talk really clearly. You see a lot of singers who'll mumble down the mic and nobody hears a thing. And a quick one for all those metal vocalists out there: please don't put your hand over the mic or cup the mic when you're singing. I know you've seen all these bands on the internet do it, and you know you think that's the way that a metal vocalist should project themselves, but it isn't. It sounds crap. Cupping the mic just causes feedback and makes it a nightmare for the sound engineer to get any kind of decent sound. And yeah, like I said, it causes loads of feedback. Don't cup the mic. Hold the mic properly. And lastly, don't talk over each other. So if there's three or four mics on stage, if you are going to talk, don't talk over each other, because again, you won't just annoy the audience and everyone else, but you'll annoy each other. So don't talk over each other. Have things planned out a little bit. Try and keep the chaos to a minimum. If there's no backing vocals going on, don't give anybody else a mic. And because a gig situation is not the same as a rehearsal situation, so you don't have the eye contact that you would in a rehearsal situation, you might not have the signals that you have to know when bits are coming in. So maybe think about these things in a rehearsal situation. So think about having hand signals or gestures or little secret messages that you can send each other, just so to keep everyone in line and make sure that if someone is losing their way a little bit, they know when to come back in. Soon as you've finished playing, thank the audience, get your stuff, pack it up and get off the stage and let the next band get on. And better still, help the next band get their stuff on. These things will pay you dividends in the future. Trust me on that. If you can generate as much goodwill as possible on the way up, it will do you all the world of good on the way down. But yeah, try and generate as much goodwill between the bands and the sound people, the venues, the promoters, because they remember these kind of things. They like to work with bands who are easy to work with. So be an easy to work with band. Don't be a bunch of dickheads and don't have an attitude, and don't turn up to the gig with loads of demands, because they will not want to work with you again. And lastly, a little quick one. I do notice a lot of people tend to have this attitude, and it's probably not their fault, but when someone pays them a compliment, a lot of people, and I used to do this, someone paid me a compliment and say, oh, that was a really good gig, and I'd be like, oh, it wasn't great, no, I wasn't very happy with the way I sang, and oh, the sound wasn't great. And I realised when someone did that to me after I made the effort to watch their gig and I loved it, and I went up to a member of the band and I said to them, oh, that was amazing, you know, you've really made my night. And they did the same to me. They went, oh, I didn't really think much of it. And suddenly I felt negative about the gig, because I loved the gig. And then he's given me a negative vibe, and it's kind of, his negativity has then been transferred to me. And I used to do it myself. What you should do, if someone pays you a compliment, get used to saying, oh, thank you very much, I really appreciate that. That's all you need to say. Now, it's not being big-headed. It's just it's saying thank you to the person for taking the time to give you a compliment. It's good manners. It's bad manners to brush off their compliment. You should really take the compliments. And obviously, on the flip side, if someone comes up to you and starts slagging you off or criticising you, chances are there's a reason why they've done that. It's probably the reason is probably them. It's not you. And if they do, just shrug it off. Criticism happens, and you know, just laugh it off. It doesn't matter. It says more about them than it does about you. And if you do have lots of family and friends or fans at the gig, do encourage them to stick around and watch the other bands as well, because like I said, these bands, they will remember this, and that they will they'll be very thankful of it. So what happens if you have a really bad gig? I've seen lots of bands come to the studio over the years, and they've rehearsed for months on end in preparation for their first gig, and then they'll play their first gig and then they'll split up. And you think to yourself, well, what went wrong? You know, I do think sometimes that some of these bands have built up an unreasonable expectation of what they will be like on their first gig or subsequent gigs. Now the truth is, and I hate to tell you this, but your band, your first gig, you're probably going to suck, especially if you're just starting out and you're an amateur band. You have to suck. You have to be rubbish. We all are. We've all been rubbish. And I look at the early gigs that I did, and you know, it's embarrassing. But you have to go through that period. And then the object of being in a band is to get gradually less rubbish the more you play. It's not about getting better, it's about getting less rubbish. And maybe 10, 15 gigs down the line, you're not rubbish anymore, you're all right. I always used to say that in our first gig, we were shit. But after our 20th gig, we were really, really well rehearsed shit. We were still shit, but we were really well rehearsed. And then if you're really well rehearsed and you're really professional, it starts to rub off and your songs start to get better. And these incremental little improvements that you make all become one better thing in the end. Don't see your first gig as the be all and end all, because being in a band is a war. It's not a battle. It's a war. It's a long, and it never ends. There is no end to it. So you'll never get to be the finished product. At least you shouldn't ever be the finished product, because you should always aim to become better. And you should go into that first gig with the expectation of no expectations. The only expectation you should have from your first gig is that you will do your best. And whatever little successes or little failures you have, you will learn from. So when you have come home from that first gig, celebrate the things that went really, really well, and take on the chin the things that didn't go well, and laugh it off and learn from it. And if you've made a mistake, there's nothing wrong with that. Just don't make it again. At least if you care, you won't make it again. You want to improve your own performance, and obviously you want the performance of the whole band to improve. So you need to take these things head on, accept it, acknowledge it. How can we learn from it? How can we improve later? What did we do right? Should we do more of that? And just take it on the chin and just be grown up about it. There will be lots of things that don't go right in those first few gigs, and it should be like that. Now, this is one of the issues I find about the young bands, or the lack of young bands who are coming through now, because I feel there's a massive fear of failure, because everything's different now. When we were growing up, and when back in the late 90s when I first started gigging, if you play a bad gig or you make a mistake or I hit a bum note, yes, the 30 or 40 people there will hear it. However, they'll probably forget about it the next day after a few drinks, and even if they don't, it's only 30 or 40 people. Whereas now, if everyone's got their smartphones out and someone makes a mistake, all they've got to do is put it on YouTube, and that mistake is immortalised on YouTube forever. And I think there's a fear of failure with young bands, that anything they do, any mistakes they make, are going to end up like that, and I feel that's a real shame. And I don't know what the solution is to this. I think part of the solution may be that people need to be better mentally prepared to be able to face criticism and face failure. I do think maybe there is an issue with people being wrapped in cotton wool a little bit and told that they're so good all the time. I know the most learning I've done in my life are from all the mistakes I've made and the little failures that I've had, because those are the challenges which either it makes you or it breaks you. And I'd like to think that young people can develop a little bit of a backbone and be able to take that criticism on board, and maybe not give so much of a damn about what other people think of them. And obviously there are positive things coming out now, especially in the media and with mental health and bullying and stuff like that, where they're trying to encourage children not to try and conform to society standards. And I do think people need to have a better awareness of how are they going to mentally prepare themselves for the risk of failure, because there's nothing wrong with failing. We should learn how to deal with it and move forward. So if you have a bad gig, don't worry about it. This isn't the end, it's just another hurdle on the journey. Now, it's the journey which should make you enjoy being a musician and enjoy being in the band, because it's those little challenges that you have to overcome which make it all worthwhile. So if you have a bad gig, fine, it was a bad gig, accept it, move on. Life goes on, there'll be another gig. And remember that some things are just out of your control. Sometimes you'll just have a bad night, and there might not be a single reason why. You might have played fine, you might have all been great, just the vibe wasn't there, maybe the audience wasn't there, maybe it wasn't a good turnout, and that's it's not always your fault, because you you might have the media telling you that live music's never been more popular, but that might be true for Adele and Paul McCartney and the Foo Fighters and bands like that. However, for us, we know that's not true. That the bands who are playing the amateur circuit and playing the small pubs and clubs and venues, we know it's really, really tough out there. And there are a lot of people who are fickle, and they'll happily pay 75 quid to go and watch Electric Light Orchestra at the London O2, but they'll turn their nose up at paying £3 to watch a band at St James's Wine Vaults in Bath, or watch 4 or 5 bands at the Wine Vaults. So, you know, that's the truth of it. Some things are just out of your control. There might be a bad sound. Sometimes a gig is just bad and there's no reason for it. Just get over it. Now, on the flip side of that, what happens if you have a really good gig? Well, that's great. Well done. Congratulations. Slap yourself on the back, have a pint. But don't get cocky. And also, was it really a good gig? Was it because you had lots of friends and family there? Was it a local gig? Was it your renter crowd? Be really honest with yourself. If you're playing lots and lots of repeatedly local gigs regularly, then are you really achieving much as a band? Are you reaching a new audience? Is your stuff really being challenged? Because the chances are your friends and family, they're going to clap and dance to anything you do because it's you and they're your friend, and you know they are programmed to like you, or at least pretend to like you. I mean, that's the truth of it. Most of these people are your friends, and a lot of them are coming to watch you out of politeness because you've asked them. A lot of them probably don't want to be there. It's the truth. You know, I hate to give you the truth, but it is the truth. I mean, it's got to the point where years ago I just stopped telling my friends about my gigs because I started to feel a little bit self-conscious that I was trying to encourage my friends to come, and I thought maybe I felt that I was putting an unnecessary burden on my friends, and I was putting them out, and they felt that if they didn't come they would be offending me somehow. So I just stopped telling them. And that's not to say that my friends don't come to my gigs, but I let them find out, and if they want to come, that's fine. If they don't, I'm not going to put any pressure on them. But what I would say to you is, if you are playing a lot of gigs where it's a lot of the same people all the time, I would challenge you to step out of your comfort zone and go play a gig in a town where you know nobody and it's a completely cold audience. And if you can get those people to applaud your music, then that's fantastic. That's a real achievement, because you know you have won over new people. Even if you only win over one new person, that's a massive achievement. To go to a new cold town and to win over a new crowd. Don't be that big fish in a small pond, and don't develop that ego that goes with it. We see a lot of young local bands in Bath. We'll be playing a lot of local gigs in and around the area, and because they're young, they have a lot of young friends, and the young friends are motivated to go to lots of gigs, so they play lots of sold out gigs. So they develop a little bit of an ego, an attitude, an arrogance, a little bit of an unjustified sense of self-importance, because their friends have created that environment for them. And so they think, oh yeah, we're going to get signed, we're going to be massive. And then they'll go and play a gig out of town, and they'll be completely humbled by it. And sometimes they'll split up. I see it all the time. You know, they think they are the bee's knees, and then they'll go out, they'll be humbled, or they'll be made to look silly, or they'll be embarrassed by another band or something else, and they can't cope with it. They can't cope with the failure. They can't cope with the embarrassment. I would challenge everybody to go step outside your comfort zone and play a gig in a situation like that, because that's where you really learn what works, what doesn't work. Are these songs really good enough? And you'll play with bands who are much, much better than you as well. And I've been in that situation many a time where we thought that we were on the cusp of something great, and then we went to play a gig in London years ago, a band I was in, and this headline band turned up from the States, and they made us look like idiots. We played our gig, we went down well, but then they came on, and it was just, we were here and they were. The musicianship, everything, the sound, the way they performed on stage, everything was so much better. Well, not just a level above us, they were 10 levels above us. And that was a massive wake-up call. I remember that journey in the van back home from London. I mean, we were like 18 at the time, but I remember that journey, we were just kind of, I almost felt like a depression was setting on me, because it felt like I'll never get there. I'll never be as good as that. And obviously, after a day or two, you kind of you work it out in your brain. You think, no, I might not ever be as good as that, but I can make changes to get better. And I remember off the back of that gig, I think we actually took a few months off from gigging, because we made a conscious decision to say, actually, we're not as good as we thought we were. And I know our egos took a little bit of a knock at the time, but we took some time off and actually went back to basics and ripped our songs apart and started writing new ones, and looked at the way that we reacted on stage and the equipment that we used and the way we performed, and the slickness of the gig, and how the transitions between the songs. We took everything apart, and we were a much, much better band off the back of that. That was a real massive learning experience. And I would recommend everybody needs to be humbled. You need to be made to look silly and rubbish, because this is what gives you the kind of, it will either make you or break you. You'll either give up, or hopefully you won't give up, and you'll think, okay, I'm going to rise to this challenge and I'm going to get better. This isn't about getting signed and being a superstar and making loads of money, because I'm none of that, obviously. But it's about enjoying the music you're doing, enjoying the company of the people around you, enjoying being in a band, and accepting the challenge of trying to get better, and working through problems together. So going on about playing local gigs, try not to do too many local gigs. Don't over gig. Don't play more than, say, one local gig every 6 to 8 weeks, because you're going to oversaturate the market, and people will just get sick of you, and it will just become another gig. Whereas you kind of want to advertise your gigs as more like events and a special occasion, so to make people really want to be there. If you're playing there every couple of weeks, you're just gonna run out of steam, and the mystique of your band will just disappear. So maybe don't go chasing all the gigs. Some gigs just aren't worth playing. Some gigs where you travel all the way to, whatever town it was, and you play to no one. And a lot of people have the mindset like, yeah, but it's like a band practice. Well, it's not really like a band practice, because everybody's had to take time off work. Everybody's had to take a night off, and it's cost you money because you've had to get a van, or you've had to pay for the petrol there. You've got to lug all the equipment. You're not getting home until 1 a.m, so you're missing out on sleep. You're waking up and going to work the next day. You're knackered and you got hangover. It isn't like a band practice. And maybe these gigs are not good for the happiness of the band. Maybe it's not conducive to a happy working environment to be playing lots of crap gigs. Maybe you should be a little bit more selective about the gigs you play. Maybe you should cut the amount of gigs you play down to make it more special. Maybe it makes it more special for the fans. If you're constantly chasing the gigs and emailing pubs and promoters and venues, and they're not chasing you, maybe you need to ask yourself, why aren't they coming to us? Why are they not asking us to play, and why is it always the other way around? There's probably a reason, and you need to be completely honest with yourself. Critique yourself. Why are they not asking us to play? Why are we never getting the good support slots? Why are we never getting asked to play this festival or this festival? There's probably a reason, and the reason is probably that you don't have enough good material. Now, you may have enough good material, but you haven't recorded it. If you haven't recorded it, then there's nothing for people to latch onto. You have to have a lot of product online. You have to have singles on iTunes and Spotify. You need to release albums. You need to have T-shirts, and but it's your music is the most important thing. Now, the music is what generates the interest, and the interest is what generates the gigs. Now, the interest these days comes from things like YouTube views and Facebook likes and Instagram likes and things like that. And I know that doesn't interest a lot of you. It doesn't interest me really, but you have to play the game. That's simply the state of the music industry at the moment. But if you don't have the stuff online, the kind of presence which makes someone like a promoter want to book your band, then they're not going to book you. So if they're not calling you or emailing you, address it. If you don't get asked to play a gig, maybe you just shouldn't gig. Maybe you should spend your time writing, rehearsing, writing, rehearsing, recording, rehearsing. Just keep getting better and better and better. Get more product onto your online marketplaces, onto Spotify and all that kind of stuff. Generate the interest that way. Then if you're good enough, and if you persevere and you have the longevity about you, and you cultivate your fan base, the gigs should naturally, organically start coming to you, and they should start offering you gigs. And you will find that the gigs you get offered generally are better than the gigs that you've chased, because the promoter, if he's offering you a gig, he's probably going to pay you. It might only be like 30 quid for the petrol, but if he's got to pay you 30 quid, psychologically, he has to work a little bit harder to make that gig worthwhile. So he's going to actually promote it. Now, a lot of promoters these days think that promoting is by putting a Facebook event up. And I'm old school. I don't believe that is what a promoter should be doing. A promoter should be doing posters, engaging with people, maybe engaging with websites and local radio stations, or engaging with their own community that they've cultivated. Maybe they curate their music to make sure that the people who come to their gigs know the type of quality of music they're going to be getting. So that's a promoter. That's someone who really cares about the music. If it's just someone who puts a Facebook event up and he doesn't even show up on the night, that isn't a promoter, and don't play those gigs. Simple as that. So yeah, let's just wrap this up. I know I've been waffling a little bit, and probably some of the stuff I've been talking about doesn't sound like it's about how to keep the relationships within the band happy and healthy. But it is, because all these things, I talked about gigging and the types of gigs and how to gig and how to rehearse. It creates a better working environment, and little things that people do can add up and cause, like I said, bigger issues which become irreconcilable later on down the line. So essentially, what I'm asking you to do is to enjoy being in the band and enjoy being a musician. Enjoy every moment. Enjoy the band practices. I mean, I see a lot of bands come to my studio and they just bicker. They'll sit in the lounge here and they'll be bickering with each other and complaining about, oh, you know, why was the last gig so bad, or you know, or they'll just have interpersonal issues, and they just blatantly don't like each other. And I just think to myself, why are you in a band together? This isn't good for you. This isn't good for your mental health. You're obviously not enjoying it. Why are you doing it? I mean, if it's a function band, I can kind of understand it, because you know they might make a lot of money on doing wedding gigs and stuff like that, or conferences, and so yeah, I suppose you could say that's more of a business. And you know, you don't really need to like the people you're in the band with. You're just going there to earn your £1,000 a night for your performance. I can kind of understand that, but I get it with originals bands, and they turn up and they're just so negative. They turn up with a stinking attitude, and like I said, they're bickering amongst each other, and this goes on for months. And I just think, why are you doing this? Well, you should not be in a band, because that cannot be good for your mental health. Be happy with the people you're with. Be thankful that you found yourself a group of people who have a similar interest to you and want to work towards something which is going to be better than the sum of its parts. It's a beautiful thing that you can make music with other people. It's amazing, really. It's like asking an artist to paint a picture with 3 other artists. Being in a band is magic, and there are times when you won't get on with each other, but you should respect each other still. And bands break up. You know, some people aren't cut out to be in bands, and some bands just aren't designed to last. But try and record everything, document it, and enjoy the moments. You know, I mean, at least if you've got some recordings or some gigs that you've played and recorded, maybe, at least in 20 years you can look back, and that's a document of the time you had. And you know, you're so lucky to have that. You're so lucky to be able to have these memories and these moments. A lot of people don't have that in their life. You know, a lot of people, you know, I mean, a lot of people have passions. I mean, some people like to go fishing on a Sunday, you know, and they're passionate about that. Or some people like to watch the football on a Saturday. Or some people go into their gymnastics or sports or whatever. That's great. I think you have to have a passion. Our passion is the music. And if you start resenting the band you're in or the music you're playing, you're killing your passion. And I've been there. I was in a situation where I was in a band where things were getting unhealthy, and I was really unhappy with what I was doing, what other people were doing in the band. And it killed my passion for music at the time. It took me a few years to get it back and to remember why I loved being in a band and performing music. So don't forget that your happiness is the most important thing, and it should make you happy to see the people around you happy as well. That's the best type of happiness. And the key to happiness is to have little achievable goals. So that could be a gig. We're working towards a gig in 3 months' time. But don't just end there. Give yourself something else. You always have to have something else. Otherwise, it's like what happened with Tyson Fury a few years ago when he won the heavyweight titles off Klitschko. Everyone thought he should have been on top of the world, but for him, that was his goal over, because that's all he ever had was beating Klitschko from like the age of 12. And then when he got there, he realised, oh, my life hasn't changed and I'm still unhappy. The underlying issues that were there before haven't been cured by what I've done. And now he's built a better mindset where he can look to the future and focus on the things that really do matter to him and set himself achievable goals. The same should be done with your band. So whether that goal might be, we're going to write a song by next month, or this practice, let's make sure we work on this song, or we work out that bit, or let's book a recording session and let's get a CD out by blah blah blah. Give yourself achievable goals. This isn't just for the band. This is a very good technique, obviously, to use in a personal situation. And I don't want to patronise you and tell you how to run your life. I'm just telling you what works for me and was worked for the bands I've been in, and I know works for a lot of the customers that we deal with. And be realistic about your band. Not everyone in your band will have the same motivation as you. Maybe they might have more, they might have less. They might have different goals. Things happen. Families come along, kids come along, jobs. Someone might move house. Someone might die. Illness. You never know what's around the corner. And this past couple of years has really taught me that I really don't know what's around the corner, and things happen all the time. And we've lost people really close to us, like people who come to our gigs as well, family, friends, and family members. And then you're playing a gig and you realise, oh, it's not the same. Things have changed, and I really wish I had paid more attention to that person or that thing a little bit more, because it's gone, it's changed. And look at this situation with the whole COVID-19. It's quite precarious, and we don't know when we're going to be able to play another gig. We might not be able to play a gig for another 18 months. It's feasible, there might not be any live music for a good year or 18 months now. It's possible. So you really need to enjoy it and make the most of it, and make the most of the venues as well. Make the most of the people around you, and just try and have a happy unit, and try not to bicker. And if there is something on your mind, be honest and communicate with people. And obviously just talking about being in a band, and some people still have the goal of making it. I know I'm way past that. I'll be 40 next year. I don't want to make it. I just want to enjoy playing music. But you might be young. You might be a young band watching this, and you have that inner desire that you think, oh, I'm actually going to make something of this, and I want this to be my career, which is great. Just know that obviously there's only a couple of ways that you can get to that. Now, you either are an amazing songwriter, you get discovered, you write a hit, and you enter the stratosphere and you're a megastar. Great. If you don't have those hits, or you don't have the luck, or you don't have the connections, and a lot of this is just luck. Some people make it just by staying the course and longevity, and just you keep gigging and you keep cultivating those fan bases and you keep releasing stuff, and just through sheer attrition you can make it, at least to some extent, because you're still around and you haven't gone away, and the quality of your stuff keeps getting better all the time. That's the only surefire way to make it in the music business, other than who you know, or having a hit, or being a one-hit wonder, or whatever. But the surefire way is to keep working and don't split up. Now, you might have to change band members. Unfortunately, it might just happen, and some people aren't cut out to be in a band. Some people, it's not healthy for them to be in a band, and some people are just not wired in the right way to be in a band. Some people are better off on their own, and that's just the sad fact of life. And remember, being in a band, sometimes when you try to take all of this in, when you have to factor in that being in a band, it needs the passion, it needs the hard work, the motivation, it needs money as well. It needs time. You have to have design skills and business skills, and you have to be able to fulfill orders and know about how to get things manufactured and how to send stuff. And you have to know about creating websites and uploading your stuff to iTunes, and you have to learn about music equipment and how amps work and how to repair things. And it can become quite overwhelming. My best advice is just to start. So get in a room, make some noise, enjoy the noise, and you will find everything else, if you have the will for it, will start to fall into place as you go. And the more people that you can bring along with you on the way, that you're nice to and you have a good communication with and a good relationship with along the way, you will find you will collect a big network of people who can all help. And before you know it, there's lots of people you can turn to and ask for help. And that's the best situation to be in. So don't try to take everything on all at once. Do things in little bite-sized chunks. Set yourself little achievable goals along the way, and you will get there. And try and be happy and enjoy the moment, because we don't know when how long we're going to have these moments, or whether we're going to get them again. So enjoy being in the band and enjoy the people around you. And look, if there's anything in this video that you disagree with, then just contact me or leave a comment or whatever. Obviously, the purpose of this video primarily is to give a little bit of advice to the younger bands, but obviously this applies to all bands really. And I'm not big-headed enough to think that everything I've said in here is gospel. I just think that just talking about these things might help someone out there. So if you have any comments, please give me a shout, comment on the video, please share it, and thank you for watching. So just a quick one. I said at the beginning of the video that I would respond to some comments I made on a Facebook post. So I'll just do that now, and I've just got your comments up here. So the first one, Ewan, he said, "We split up because I genuinely thought I was past it at 27. Also because at the time the Bath Bristol scene required you to be metal funk to get decent bookings. If I met my 27-year-old self, I'd take myself outside for a proper talking to. Only give up when they've cut your legs off." I mean, I'm 39 now, so I remember feeling that way about 25, because obviously I was still in the mindset that I wanted to be in a band that was touring, and we were signed, and we did get signed, and it turned out not to be what I thought it would be, and that's true for the vast majority of people. So yeah, I don't see age as an issue. It shouldn't stop you from performing and being in the band and just enjoying what you're doing, because it really is a great thing to do, and it's great for young kids to be in bands because it stops them from doing so many bad things as well. It's one of the most positive things you can do. I would say the same about a child joining a sports team as well, or joining the Cubs or the Scouts or the Girl Guides, or just joining any club. I think is a great thing for anyone to do, because you get a sense of camaraderie, and you also feel a sense of achievement with being in the band, because I remember the feeling of, we played a festival in Sheffield not so long ago, and we were playing with these bands that we really look up to, and we were on the same stage as them. And I remember on the side of the stage there was a screen which had all the bands, like the lineup for that day, and the headline band was Electric Wizard, and our name was just not too far underneath it. And I just thought for a minute, I thought, that's really cool, isn't it? Because we came up with our band name only a few years ago. That we made this happen, and now from our own actions we are here. And I know it's only a small little success, playing at a festival, but because the feeling that our name was next to a name of a band that we really respected, that was a real sense of achievement. And we probably and as a band we really looked at each other and thought, oh, this is really cool that we did this together. And that, I think that's a really positive thing. And obviously he mentions that the scene at the time required them to be a metal funk band. Well, that was only in your head, wasn't it, Ewan? Yes, I mean, that might have been the prevalent genre or music or sound at the time, but that shouldn't put you off from doing what you do. I mean, I often think that bands that try to copy the scene or try to follow the scene end up sounding like a bit of a pastiche, and you get lost in the crowd because you sound like everyone else. There's no reason why, even if the music you're playing might be quite dated, if you're really good at it, there probably will be a niche of people who will like it as well. It's better to be a master of one trade than it is a jack of all trades. So yeah, I completely agree with you. But also, Ewan, I'd say to you also, what's stopping you from doing it now? And I know you, and I know you've got a family and you've got commitments, but you can find time to do it. I know you can, because you're a creative person. You know, you've got a lot about you, and there's no reason why you cannot join or start a band now. You can give me 10 reasons, and I will challenge every single reason you give me, and I'd enjoy that. So please do. So a couple of comments on that. David said, out of interest, what was that project? He played in a metal band in Bristol and generally found good bookings. Yeah, it was a different time, wasn't it, David? But yeah, but you're right. I mean, Bristol's a good example because it's such a diluted scene, and it can, in my experience, Bristol has always been a bit cliquey. Obviously, we've always been based in Bath. Now, when we were starting up, when I was in a metal band as well years ago, we found the scene in Bristol a little bit cliquey. So in the end, we tended not to play in Bristol. We tended to try and go out of our comfort zone and find these little towns and cities completely out of the way. And that was a really good experience as well. I remember we ended up playing a really random gig in a place called Berkhamsted, which I think is somewhere near London, I think. And we'd never heard of it. And obviously we turned up and it was like some kind of quaint little town in some village hall. We thought, oh my God, what are we doing here? And it ended up being brilliant. All these kids just turned up, and I got the feeling that these kids were like so starved of music that they just turned up for any gig. And we ended up getting a massive following there. And so we used to go back to Berkhamsted every year, and it almost became like a home from home kind of show. And it reminds me of the band Insane Clown Posse, the rap duo thing. I remember reading a story about how they started, because Tim from the studio, he's a big Insane Clown Posse fan. He's a bit of a juggalo from back in the day. Don't judge him on that, but yeah, I remember him telling me a story of how they literally got a pin, closed their eyes, and put the pin in a map, and it just landed on some town. And so they thought, well, what we're going to do is we're going to bombard that town and make that our second home. And so they'd go over there, they'd go to this town, and they'd go around in a van playing their music and giving people their tapes, and playing as many gigs there as they can. And then when they went back there the year later, they were like the kind of homecoming heroes, because, you know, suddenly they'd made a home from home. So, you know, there's lots of different ways you can approach it. And if you're not happy with the scene you're in, go to a different scene or make a new scene. This is what I'm waiting for kids to do at the moment. A lot of them aren't playing gigs because they're saying, well, there's no gigs, they're not putting on gigs. And that might be true in Bath, but think outside the box. There's always ways to start a scene. I remember in the early 2000s, some kids in Trowbridge started putting on some gigs at some random venues like the White Swan and Terry's Night Spot at the time, and the Snooker Club, and there was a village hall, and they kept putting on these gigs, and before you knew it, they were getting some really big bands coming to play there. They were getting like Bring Me the Horizon, Frank Turner from Million Dead, and Enter Shikari, and Head PE, and all these bands, and excuse me, and we ended up supporting a lot of these bands, and we got to play some really good shows in Trowbridge because the kids made it happen, because they had an interest. So I'd say to any of the younger bands watching now, it's what you make of it. So if there are no venues which you can play at, make the venue. So I don't actually mean make the venue, I mean think outside the box. I mean, there's social clubs in Bath which are not being used. They've got huge rooms out the back, function rooms. Like where I live in Weston, there's a Western Ex-Services Association. They got a huge function room out the back, and I was just thinking to myself, I went there for a pint, obviously before this all happened, and I was thinking, wow, this will make a fantastic gig if some, you know, kids came along with a PA system and started putting on a regular night and maybe an open mic or acoustic, or put some bands on even. They could make a scene, and then a couple of kids go, oh, what's that, a gig? And before you know it, they're part of the live music scene, and they're going to bring their friends. And before you know it, you've got something great happening. I mean, I saw something recently, because obviously one of the schemes that we have at the studio, the Mass Records scheme, we have to mentor a lot of young bands, and the government funds their rehearsal and recording, And part of it is that myself and the other people here, the engineer and Tim, we have to mentor them and help them, give them advice. This is part of it, is giving advice and trying to counsel them and give them resources on how to kind of better prepare themselves for the real world and the music world and that kind of thing. And we noticed that about 4 or 5 of the bands on our scheme were playing a gig in Moles in Bath. So I spoke to Tim. I said, we should go to that because we can get some footage, because we need to get evidence, to collate evidence that these youngsters are using their time well and they're benefiting. And obviously playing a gig at Moles is a really big success for these bands. So we wanted to get some footage and chat to the bands. And so I arranged to meet Tim at Moles, and he got there 10 minutes before me. And as I'm walking down, I got the bus and he sent me a text saying, you better come quick because it's really, really busy. And I was like, what? I thought it's just a normal band night. And when I got there was a queue outside. So I stood in the queue and it was 1 in, 1 out. So I sent him a text. I said, I don't think I'm going to get in because it's 1 in, 1 out. And so Tim sent me a message back saying it's absolutely packed in here. And I spoke to the man on the door. I almost felt like saying, do you know who I am? I run a studio, you should let me in. But I thought, no, this is fantastic. So I just sent Tim a text. I said, tell you what, you get the footage and I'll meet you in the pub after for a pint. Because, I don't want to take up a place for someone who might want to go and watch the bands. So obviously Tim got some footage and saw the gig, and we met up afterwards, and we thought that was amazing. And that was one of the members of one of the bands. He was like 17 years old, who put the show on, and that's amazing. And I spoke to Liam, who runs Moles, with Tom. I sent him a message saying, I'm really impressed that they had a sold out show, and it's under 18, so obviously they had to have wristbands for if they wanted to have a drink and stuff like that. But that was a really positive sign, and it shows you that there is life in the old dog, and to see so many kids come out and watch that was a real eye opener for me, because I was getting to the point where I was starting to lose a bit of faith, if I'm honest, that I've really struggled to find the young bands. And this year's been quite good. We've had quite a few young bands come through, and we've been running. I did like a battle of the bands at Norton Hill School where we sponsored the prizes and stuff, because it's a way of me trying to encourage the local talent in and around Bath just to keep going and not give up. And I remember when I gave the prize out to the winning band, I made a point of saying to all the bands, I said, you're all winners and you're all fantastic, but what I did say to them, and what I really wanted to get across, is don't give up. Don't let this little failure, it wasn't a failure because they're all fantastic. And I said they were all brilliant. I mean, in fact, the first and second band, there was like 1 point between them. I think there was 4 of us on the judging panel. But I said to them, please don't give up. Please keep going, because this is a fantastic thing for you to do as individuals and as a band. And it doesn't matter if your band breaks up or you go on to different things, because you will go on to different things, because they're in the last year of school, maybe it's year 10 or year 11, something like that. But you will remember these things, and it will stand you in good stead when you're going forward. So yeah, please don't give up. And yeah, Ewan, I would highly suggest you just carry on, mate. There's nothing stopping you from doing music. I'd love to hear what you can do. Dan Healy, right, Dan, he said his band split up. I can't pronounce his band name, never could. Split up for the following reasons. A bit of backstory: his band were kind of like a joke death metal band, but they ended up getting some really good gigs, and it was kind of ironic, but he ended up putting on like a yearly festival, and they get these really big bands playing. For some reason we never played. I think he asked us to play, and we couldn't do it for some reason, the band I was in at the time. But I definitely went to one of them. Number 1, everyone was suddenly worried about their reputation and what people might think. I don't know what this means, because if people thought that a joke band was a joke, then I call that a complete success. Well, yeah, I completely agree, Dan. Yeah, that's another one. Is people feeling like their reputation is going to be damaged. I was in a band not too long ago where we were kind of like electro, pop, rock, indie, and I think a couple of the members had the attitude that they were above it, maybe, or it wasn't good for their reputation. I remember, he won't mind me saying this, but my mate Bib, who I've been in bands with for years, he was a guitarist, and I remember there was a song we did which I really like, because it's a really poppy song. It was called Starry World. I thought it was one of our strongest songs, But I remember we played it, and I think one of his friends said something to him at the gig. I think his friend said, "Oh, I didn't like that Starry World." And then all of a sudden, Bib went from loving that song to the next practice, "Oh, I don't want to play that one again." And I don't know if Bib's going to watch this, but I reckon that you were turned by your friend Bib. I think his negative thought got in your mind. I talked about this earlier in the video. I think you can't take on every bit of criticism, and you're not going to please everybody. You have to have faith in yourself, and you have to have faith in your own material, and because you are your best critic really, and you should rely on the band around you to also have good taste, because you're in a band with them. So you should think that your friends who you've known for years have good taste in music, and you know a good song. So if someone criticizes something you do, don't take it to heart. Obviously you can take criticism on board, but I remember from that moment on, it was like, don't want to play that song anymore. And I'd even say it at gigs, like before we play the song, it was like, oh, we're not going to play his favourite song. And it didn't go down well. But yeah, it's funny how insecurities can kind of creep in. There's not much you can do about that, is there really? I suppose it's, you have to choose who you're in a band with quite carefully, and like I said before, communication, and keep the communication up. And sometimes you have to be really honest with each other and have a proper chat. Sometimes little things like that can build up and build up. I mean, luckily me and Bib, and obviously the rest of the band, were all good mates, and it wasn't a problem. But I imagine something like that could cause rifts between people if you let it become that. I mean, the band didn't last anyway, but for whatever reason. Number 2, he got bored of dealing with bands who would get upset we would be booked above them. Yeah, I mean, so that's the ego, isn't it, and the arrogance and everything that goes with it. And again, I mentioned that earlier. It's like you need to be humble when you're a band, and you need to show respect and appreciation to everybody, all the bands, the sound people, the venues, the promoters, even those who probably don't deserve respect. You have to be the better person, and it does stand you in good stead. And I never understand it when bands are at these gigs, and I've met many of them who have this attitude of we've played gigs with bands. I remember years ago in London when we used to play a lot in Camden, and we play with these big sign bands, American bands and stuff, and they would do everything within their power to sabotage the support slot or the support band. So I remember one band we played with, I think they were like an Italian metal band, and we turned up, we were told to turn up for sound check at 5 o'clock. This is in London, so obviously we had to take the day off and drive up really early, and then when we got there, we were told that we wouldn't be sound check until 8 or something like that. And then the headline band turned up like an hour late, and then the drummer took an absolute age to set up his drum kit, and then he would hit a snare drum for the sound man, and then he'd just walk off and go upstairs and have a pint, and then he'd come back down 20 minutes later after he's had his pint, hit the snare drum again, no, not happy with that, and go upstairs and have another pint. And this went on for about 2 hours. And so if we were due to start playing at 9:30, they'd only just finished sound checking the band at 9:25. So we got 5 minutes to get our stuff on stage and have a ridiculously quick line check. Well, people were coming into the room, so it's made us look unprofessional. And I remember thinking, oh yeah, that's how it is. And that's happened again and again and again and again. And I vowed that if I was ever in that position where I was a headline band and I commanded some kind of power, I would never treat a support band in that way. But you will find that that's what happens, and you just have to suck it up and just smile, get on with it, because there's so many gig situations where it's not going to be perfect and things are going to be a compromise, and you will not have the sound check that you thought you would, or you will not have the equipment that you were promised. You just have to suck it up and get on with it. And especially festivals, talking about what Dan's saying, in festival situations, bands really should be falling over themselves to make things easy for everybody, because it's a team effort, and you have to get your stuff on stage on time and get off on time, and make the whole experience good for everybody. So yeah, And number 3, he got bored of people. Well, that's down to you, Dan. You know. Camilla. Right, Camilla. In my first band, our management were too precious as they had put us together. So when we finally got offered a big deal after years of hard work, they weren't happy handing over the reins. And that's when we realised we were stuck in a useless project. Managers can be very useful, but only the right ones. Yeah, I remember you telling me about that, and it sounds like the deal that you had with the managers was all wrong, totally wrong. And sadly, I mean, I don't see the point in managers until you've got some real interest in the band and you've got a following and you've developed or cultivated a fan base. You can pretty much manage everything yourself. I mean, what I do in our band, I manage everything pretty much, in terms of the websites, the merchandise, online. We're effectively our own record label, so we deal with our own distribution, and I've found a distributor who can distribute worldwide for us, and you can do this all yourself. It's actually all these things, they sound hard. We've had like thousands of vinyl records made, and we've sold them, and like I said in the video, when you try and take on everything at one go, it becomes overwhelming. But if you do it piece by piece, actually it's all right, and things start to run themselves after a while. Now, I'm not trying to say that managers are bad, because there's some great managers out there, but you have to remember that they need something out of it. They need a slice of the pie. Same with labels. So you hear all these stories about when bands signed like a £100,000 record deal, and you think, oh wow, they got £100,000. Well, no, they didn't get £100,000. They've been lent £100,000. Worse than that, sometimes they don't actually receive the £100,000. What it means is the label have set aside £100,000 to pay for the recording of your album, the videos, the producer, the advertising, the manufacturing, all these things, the marketing. Not only that, but the studio will send you to, the label will send you to their own designated studio and their own designated producer. Just so happens that designated studio and the designated producer work for the label, and they're going to charge the label some ridiculous daily price. And I've seen this recently with Josh's band. They were offered a deal where they wanted to sign them up, but they had to go to this kind of middle of the road looking studio in London somewhere, where they were charging £700 a day for the recording. Now, most studios, even the high-end studios, are not charging. Well, some of them might be charging, but I mean, £700 a day. You could go to Rockfield and some amazing studio like that. So what they were doing is funneling the money back into their own company. So they charged themselves top whack, which meant that, say they built up a sum of £20,000 to record the album, and then they get their own person to do the video, and they charge themselves £20,000 for the video. And so they rack up this amount of debt, this imaginary debt, really, because the reality is, if their mate works for the studio, the mate is invoicing them £700, but the label's only paying them £300. Does that make sense? So it's all very nefarious. And obviously they have their own pressing plants, a lot of these major labels, so they will charge you some to produce a vinyl. They'll probably charge you £6 a unit or something like that, but it's only costing them £2 a unit. Does that make sense? Because they own the pressing plant. So they've built up this huge amount of debt, which they're going to hold against your band. So they're going to say, well, we offered you £100,000 advance. We've actually got £250,000 worth of costs. So the first £250,000 you make is going to come straight to us. So you're not going to get any money. That's the truth of most of these deals. And I'm generalising. There's some great labels out there, and there's some real good managers who want to work with you and develop your talent. But there's a lot of them who just want something out of it, and they see a talent and they know they can exploit it. I would say in those situations, don't sign anything until you've had someone properly look over it. And sometimes pay a music lawyer £100 is worth it if it means saving you thousands in the future. So from what I remember of that brief conversation I had with you about that, Camilla, is the actual contract probably wasn't really worth the paper it was written on. and there wasn't much way of getting out of it other than leaving the band. And you see this all the time. You see it with Liam from Moles, his band Seven Crowns. They used to be called Tiny Elvis, and the only way that he'd get out of the deal they had with Gulf Records at the time was to disband and then just start a new band up with pretty much the same lineup and just change the name. And that's how they got out of the deal, because the deal was just had them bent over backwards. So yeah, thanks for that, Camilla. Scott, lack of drive, girlfriends getting in the way, people not believing in themselves, people not realising how good they can be, people's egos getting in the way. Girlfriends and boyfriends, I think they should stay away from, because it's like my girlfriend. She's into gymnastics and she's an artist, and it would be like me sitting next to her while she's doing an exhibition, or me going to, I don't know, just stand by her while she's doing the gymnastics. I mean, that's her passion, and I want her to have her own life and her own her own passions and her own interests. It's important that you have separate interests, and I think if you're trying to incorporate your partner with the band, it always ends in tears. You know, someone in the band's going to get upset and go, why's she doing it? And I see that all the time in the studio. You'll get someone whose girlfriend or boyfriend always turns up to band practice, and it just... the truth of it is that in a band, whether you're a band of girls, a band of boys, or a bit of both, or whatever, you have a humour and a way of talking which is only suitable for that band. You know the limitations of the topics you can discuss. You know, I mean, I think if anyone sat in on a rehearsal that we had in our band, they'd be disgusted. They probably think that we're animals, because we have really dark senses of humour. We don't mean any of it. It's all just for shock value. We like ribbing on each other. We've all got completely different political beliefs and all that kind of stuff, and we love it. We love having a go at each other, and we love kind of having a bit of a cat fight. But if anyone out of context came into the room, they'd probably take something out of context and think, these are horrible people. And we wouldn't talk like that with anyone else. We'd only do it amongst ourselves. And you've probably got the same experience with your close friends. There's things you can say amongst your close friend group that you probably wouldn't say with another group of friends you've got. You know how it is where you have a group of close friends from school, which you still see on a regular basis, and then you develop another group of close friends outside of school, like at work, or maybe another interest you've got, and you have these friendship groups. And sometimes you have situations like a birthday or a celebration or something where these groups intermingle, and it very, very rarely works. So we notice that it's like, because they know a different side of you to them, and you have a different way of talking with those people than you do these people, and sometimes it's better just to avoid it and keep things separate, different facets of your life. And I think a band is the same thing. Obviously, your partners can come along to the gigs, and but even at the gigs, if Sarah comes, I mean, she rarely gets the chance to come to our gigs now because of the kids and stuff, but if she comes to the gig, she knows that I can't spend much time with her. I've got to be with the band and with the people who've come to watch the gig. It's not that I'm trying to avoid her, it's that it's two different things, and it's really hard to explain. It's not a personal thing. Obviously, I love the fact that Sarah's come to the gig. She brought Louis to one gig as well, which is amazing, because he was so small at the time. But I couldn't devote the time to her, because when you're at a gig, you know what it's like. You have to schmooze, and you have to kind of thank people for coming, and you have to kind of act the part as well. Because being in the band is almost like acting, isn't it? It's almost like you are performing. And I know me personally, when I'm on stage, I'm not me. I'm kind of like the more exaggerated version of me, and I show off a little bit, and I thrust my hips and say "huh" every 2 seconds. But I don't do that in real life. But yeah, girlfriends is well, it should be boyfriends and girlfriends. And lack of drive. Well, there's not much you can do about that, Scott. I mean, if they don't have the drive, I mean, like I said in the video, you've got to hope that your professionalism and your motivation rubs off on other people, and you can only worry about you. And if other people don't have that, then they are just dead weight, and there comes a point where you have to make a clean break. And people's egos, yeah, it's a hard one, but that comes from experience. So for younger bands, it's harder because you have that kind of spirit of youth about you, and you are the best. You're going to take on the world, and then life slowly beats you down, and you realise you're not the bee's knees, and there are so many people better than you. And I think by the time I got to 22, I think I had all the ego beating out of me, really. And I think by the time I got to about, I think 28 is when I actually became a more rounded individual. I think that's when I really kind of matured as a musician and as a person. I think women mature earlier than men. I think men take a lot longer to, that's a generalization, obviously, but from personal point of view, I look at the friends around me, and a lot of men kind of, it's in their late 20s, early 30s when they kind of finally get a grip on themselves and start taking responsibility. And I know that from a personal point of view, around that age is when I really started to kind of really appreciate what I'm good at, be honest with myself. I knew what I was good at, and I knew what I wasn't good at. And so there's no kind of ego then. There's no kind of there's no pride, really. It's just like you're just honest with yourself. What does Doug say? My ego. One of my bands split because I was in another at the same time, and was dedicating more efforts to the one that had more commercial appeal. It caused a rift, and people left, and I presumed because I was still in one good band, people would jump at the chance to join me in my other project. They didn't, and we broke up as there were only 2 of us left. That taught me a pretty valuable lesson. Yeah, I mean that's another thing to discuss, isn't it? If you're in more than one band. I mean, myself and the guitarist, we're in 2 bands, and we make a real effort not to let one band slip, or not to let the other people feel like we're not giving 100%. And it's obviously impossible sometimes, because there's always going to be one band which has something on which the other band has to suffer for, and that's hard, and that's where the communication comes in. You have to keep the communication up, because, like I said, these people are your friends, and you have to respect them. And so it's continual. You have to keep on it. What does David say? David, don't know if I can say that. Dude, you turned up to practice in the K-hole, and it took you 20 minutes to plug your guitar into the amp. That's why. He's joking, obviously. Or I hope you're joking. Yeah, so Doug, I know you well, Doug. You know as well as I do that obviously substance abuse isn't particularly conducive to a good working environment. And obviously you've been in a lot of bands, and you probably have as much experience as I do. And I expect I know you've matured a lot over the years, and yeah, and it's good that you can kind of be self-effacing and kind of look back with hindsight and acknowledge that obviously there are personal decisions you make which can have negative effects on the people around you, and yeah, and being honest with yourself is good. So yeah, it's a really hard one. Like I said, it has to be knocked out of you. Gareth, being in a committed band is like a marriage, but with 3/4 of the people, and sometimes that marriage can be an effort or effortless depending on what your goals are. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I talked about that earlier. That it is like a marriage, and marriages go through rocky periods, and it's those periods where you really have to work on what you're doing and make an effort to make sure that no one's dead weight, or no one's taking advantage, or no one's taking the other people for granted. So yeah, it is like a marriage, and not all marriages work. So Adam, the one that always comes up for me is that there always seems to be one member of the band that is a leader. They book the rehearsals, gigs, do all the promo, drawing the artwork, the posters. The other members of the band are happy turning up and playing. They may help out a bit, but in general, it all comes down to one person. Then the day comes when that person has enough. Where there are 2 people in the audience, or something else goes wrong, they have enough and either A, leave, B, kick out the laziest member of the band, or C, combust. Either way, bands seem to need this leader role, but inevitably they burn out. Yeah, exactly. That's what I said earlier about The most successful bands are the bands who have someone who's the driving force. But like you said, when that person who is the driving force is down, or they're in a situation where they can't go on, and the rest of the band aren't there to pick up the pieces, then yeah, it's end game, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I've been in that situation where I think I've made myself become a bit of a martyr, where I've taken on all the responsibility and then I'll throw my toys out of the pram and say, why doesn't anyone else do the work, and why am I always doing it, and you don't appreciate me, and blah blah. But the truth is, and I came to realise this, that I do enjoy being that driving force, and I enjoy all the things that come with it. I enjoy, like I said, I enjoy working towards a target and getting things done. I love recording. I love the whole act of getting the artwork done and sending it off to print and getting vinyls made and then shipping them and selling them, and I love all of that. And for years I would kind of resent the other band, and now I'm just like, actually, you know what, guys, it's better if you just leave this to me, because I'd rather they concentrate on the things they're amazing at, which is their performing and their writing. And obviously I have periods where I feel down and I need a help, and our communication now is so much better, because I mean, we've had big barnstorming arguments with each other where we literally have let everything out, and I personally, I don't know about the other guys, but I felt completely cleansed afterwards, because I got everything off my chest and they got off everything off their chest, and we were properly honest with each other. And some of it can be quite hurtful, but you're better people at the end of it. And the relationship, because it's a relationship based on honesty, is so much healthier going forward, because you can be honest, because they respect you, you respect them, and honesty is the kind of has to be the underlying thing throughout every band. You have to have if you're walking on eggshells around someone, that's a recipe for disaster. If you can't say to someone what you really think, or if you've got a problem, and again, I remember your band, Adam, and yeah, I mean, it's that's the issue, isn't it? If one person's the driving force and then they lose interest, what are you going to do? I suppose you have to kind of, if that person's got a big ego, maybe stroke it every now and then and just, make them feel like they're appreciated. Again, you can only control yourself. You can't control everyone around you. You can only be the best that you can be. And if there's anything you can do to support that person, I mean, it's good that you've got the kind of self-awareness to know that this person was the driving force. It wasn't you. But you were happy to be that person, to kind of be there just to almost do as you're told. But yeah, I think that's, what did David say? He said, that's a really interesting point, and one I felt many times myself. I think the role is needed, but can be shared in a band with good chemistry. It can be, but it's really rare. It's really rare that you'll get... I mean, there's a couple of bands I know personally who've got like kind of two driving forces, and that's great, because you can rely on each other, and it's almost like, and when that works, that's brilliant, because you get so much more done. I mean, a perfect situation is you have 4 or 5 members of the band who are all on it and they're all pushing, and wow, imagine what you'd achieve if all 5 members or 6 members of the band are all working towards the same goal and all plugging away and all contacting all the people that need to be contacted. I mean, yeah, that's great, but that is so rare. It's, I don't know many bands who are like that. And also, it's that old adage, isn't it? Like a horse designed by committee becomes a camel. And sometimes if you have one person who's got that singular vision for how the band should be, that's better than this kind of cobbled together compromise of what everybody wants, and what you end up with is something that nobody wants. So you might be in a band with someone who's got a really clear vision, and it might not be exactly what you want, but at least it's a focused project. And if you're in a band where you're taking a look, here's an example. We had a band recently, I think they were like a metal band, and they recorded in the studio. And what you do when you've got all the tracking done. So I think they were in for like 3 or 4 days doing a single, 2 or 3 tracks. I can't quite remember. Can't remember what band it was actually. I was talking to Josh about this the other day, and it was that classic example. So what we do is we say to the band, okay, once we've recorded all stuff, can you give us like just give us some examples of the kind of sound that you're after? Maybe link us to some bands that you like the sound of, and that will give us a reference point to know how we should mix it, how we should treat the tracks, and how the level should be, any kind of particular effects or sounds that you want. And this particular band, they came back with a massive list of stuff. And so, you had the drummer say, I want the kick drum to sound like Pantera. I want the snare drum to sound like Metallica. And then the guitarist came in and says, I want the guitars to sound like Kyuss. And then the bassist came in and said, I want the bass to sound like the Chili Peppers. And then the singer came in and said, I want the singing to sound like Muse. And then you're like, you all want something completely different. If we give you everything you want, it's going to be an absolute mess. There's no focus, and sometimes you'll send the mixes off to the band once you're done. You send them the mix, and obviously you say to them, right, sit on the mixes for a week or so, collate your thoughts, send them to us, and we'll make any changes. Whether that or they might come in and sit with us, and we'll just make the final changes, mix revisions we call it, which is fine. That's standard. And then you'll get, rather than get one email, which is what we asked for them to collate all the stuff into one email. Each member of the band will email us individually, and you'll get the drummer will email saying, I want my kit louder. And then the singer will say, can you put the vocals up? And then the guitarist say, I want the guitars louder. And then the bassist say, I can't hear the bass enough. Can it? And so there's no chemistry within the band. They're not talking to each other. There's no communication. They all want themselves louder. They're not thinking of the whole. They're thinking of the parts. And we all know that the whole is greater than some of its parts. And if you had one person in the band who had a vision for how that song should sound, that would be better. That would be better than anything that they could come up with from all of the band. I guarantee it. It's always that way. I'm not saying each person's right or wrong, but if everybody wants their stuff turned up, then it makes no difference. It's going to sound the same. Just the whole thing sounds louder. And that's another subject in itself, isn't it? The whole mastering thing. But yeah, I mean, that's just a good example of how if you try and please everyone and you please no one. And it's the same with your music. If you try and incorporate everything into your band, it's going to sound shit. See if there's any more. Andrew said, technology, after going through 7 different drummers and 4 bassists in the space of 8 years, me and the singer, who were the songwriters of the band, decided we couldn't be asked with endlessly recruiting band members. The drummers always quit, and we never did find a bassist that was a good fit, so we kitted ourselves out with samplers, drum machines, etc., and got into making music on our own. Well, I suppose that's that's one solution, isn't it? Is just to have less band members. I mean, I did say each additional member is a potential problem. It's also a potential fantastic thing to have. I'm not trying to put anyone off being in the band, because I love being in the band, and there's a lot to be gained, and a lot of achievement to be felt from making something work as a band. But yeah, I mean, if you find it easier to work with a computer than a band, and obviously, maybe there's less things to go wrong at your gigs as well. I mean, personally, I've never kind of liked the idea of having like a drum machine, because you don't have the same feel. But then I suppose I haven't heard your music, Andrew, but if your music's kind of like New Order style, kind of Empire of the Sun, or kind of EDM kind of stuff, then maybe that's the way to go. There's no right or wrong answer, is there? Chris, be honest when things aren't working. More my last band, it was because of me. I took a step back and introduced them to another guy who I thought was a better fit, and they went off and gigged and recorded. Don't be afraid to talk about problems, but be constructive when dealing with them. Yeah, it's communication, isn't it? And yeah, honesty. And it's funny, isn't it, Chris, that how the benefit of time makes everything kind of a little bit more crystal clear, and you're quite honest about how maybe it was something you were doing that was the problem. Maybe your attitude, I don't know. But yeah, it's good to have a bit of self-honesty. Loz says, a decade ago we disbanded because we started taking it too seriously and the fun kind of disappeared. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? The minute you're not enjoying it is the minute, then what's the point? I mean, what is the point if you're not enjoying it? And things like managers and bad gigs or too many gigs or not the right gigs, and then things like that can kind of start to creep in, and you start to think, what's the point? And you're getting in late and you're knackered the next day and it was a crap gig. And it's what I was saying earlier, is like, sometimes it's not worth playing these gigs. If it's just going to make you depressed, or make you not want to do it anymore, or make you fear the next gig, why don't you just stop playing these gigs and only play the right ones? Be a little bit more choosy about the gigs. Maybe there should be quality, not quantity. And yeah, and once things start getting serious, the fun can be sucked out of it. I mean, the current band I'm in at the moment, I think the reason why we're still a band is because we kind of said to each other at the beginning, there's no point trying anything with this band. Let's just have fun. So yeah, we don't chase gigs, and we, the only targets that we set ourselves are targets for our own kind of personal creativity. So, so we'll say, let's try and record an album by August or something like that. That's a personal goal, but we don't have a label who we're beholden to. So no one's waiting for us, and so we're not contractually obliged to do it, because we are our own label, and no one's going to tell us what to do and tell us how to do it and who to work with and how it should look. We just do whatever we want. And so we have also that mindset then when we do play a gig, it doesn't matter if it's a bad gig, because we've played so many bad gigs over the years that it's just another gig, and we're just going to try to enjoy being together and enjoying the time and enjoying the moment. And yeah, it's so easy to forget that. And like I said, in this situation, when we don't know when we're going to gig again, it amplifies everything and kind of brings everything into focus a little bit more about the reason why you do what you do, because you realise, oh my God, I really do miss music. I miss being in a band, and it makes you think about the people you've fallen out with as well, doesn't it? It makes you think about the quibbles and the arguments you've had with people, and it kind of puts it into perspective, and you kind of think, oh, maybe I should give him a call. And I know he was a dickhead to me, but he was a friend, and we all make mistakes, and I've had that personally recently, and it has kind of made me kind of rethink, what, life's too short, and maybe I should kind of unburn that bridge, even if I do think I'm the one in the right, and obviously I'm not always in the right, but things like the situation at the moment kind of do bring things back into focus, and maybe hopefully it's going to kind of refocus some people to think, maybe I should be directing my energy towards something more positive, and something that I can work towards, and something I really enjoy. So yeah, but thanks for those comments, everyone, and if you do have any more comments, so just leave them on the video. And again, if you disagree with anything I say, please feel free to comment. But anyway, thanks for your time, and I realised this video went on a lot longer than I thought, and obviously I haven't covered everything, and I've only kind of glossed over tiny bits of being in the band, but hopefully you can find something in it which helps you out, might make you feel a bit better, and maybe might make you feel like you're not on your own, and no band is perfect, and we all go through these problems all the time. Anyway, see you later, bye.